Hey everyone, welcome to the College Football Rundown, episode 15. I'm Woj,
I'm Walt.
and not too much jumps out of the box this week, Walt, at you, does it?
No, it really doesn't. Last week we nailed it. There was some value last week, and we let everyone know about it. Florida, Alabama, Notre Dame, Texas, Georgia, Iowa. Only loss really last week was Arizona State. Take 6 out of 7 any week, Woj. We throw in stories under that he guaranteed the fans was going to cover. It covered. Boom. What a great week. This week I see very little value. A little bit here, a little bit there. We'll talk about it with some of the games, but we're going to do a special episode this week. It's going to air Friday. I'm going to go over with a couple other people. Maybe they see value where I don't this week because I just don't see it, Woj.
I always call those couple weeks before Thanksgiving moving week. As far as gambling goes, you have your bad weeks, your good weeks as far as games. But I see this as those teams jostling for position in the playoff rankings, trying to get into that top four. This week and next week are huge weeks for that. It's just the moving weeks. But as far as DFS goes, there's some huge over/under games, and there's a lot of injuries out there this time of the season. So it's a good week for DFS at least. First game we got on the slate today is Penn State, 9-1, heading to Ohio State, 11-0. It's game day, 11 o'clock on Fox, Wall.
It's going to be a game to watch, Woj. Ohio State minus 18.5, over under 58. All you Big Ten fans get ready because this game has major implications. Going to be tough though, Woj. There's some news about KJ Hamler, right?
Yeah, KJ Hamler's day to day after being hurt in the Indiana game, one of the last plays, and then Chase Young, Ohio State's linebacker, is back for the Buckeyes after that suspension with the alleged money he was loaned a couple years ago.
Hey, Woj, both those are good reasons why the Buckeyes are given 18.5 because they're both working out in Ohio State's favor, I think.
It is. It's helping that, what most people call the best team in the nation for sure. This is a tough DFS game. I want to take cheap options on Penn State, but Ohio State's just so good. If you want to go some Ohio State guys, your Justin Fields is amazing. He's 8,600, so he's expensive. But Penn State gives up 240.3 yards in the air per game. They're about to go against probably one of the best quarterbacks they have seen yet this year, and it's the number one team in the nation, essentially almost. You could pair him with a couple of receivers or some options at receivers. Is Chris Olave, who's 5,900, solid option with 593 yards and 9 TDs in the season. A little cheaper option at 5,300 is Benjamin Victor. I played Victor before earlier this year. He's good. He's kind of a big play guy. He's only got 27 receptions so far, but a lot of yards, 459 and 6 TDs. So he'd be your wild card for a touchdown. But I do see a little bit of value on the Ohio State side.
Well, as far as the game goes, Woj, we're talking about a Penn State team being talked about as a possible national champion, I should say, 3 weeks ago. They lost to Minnesota, and man, did people they did not respect them anymore at all. Far outside chance, right now of Penn State getting to the national championship or getting to the playoffs for that matter. They'd need Ohio State, the team they're playing this week, to obviously lose 2 in a row. That's going to be tough for a good football team like Ohio State. In the game specifically, though, Penn State has covered 4 of the last 5 times in this series. It's a little surprising to me. The average margin of victory of the last 3 games in this series, Woj, this is going to knock you off your seat. 1.6 average margin of victory the last 3 games. We had a 1-point game, a 1-point game, and a field goal game. I don't even remember that. I watch all the Big Ten games. These are obviously big games every year, Ohio State, Penn State, but I can't say I remember that. Do you remember that happening, Woj, the past 3 years?
No, that's crazy.
It threw me off. I didn't remember it, but, it would lead me to jump on the 18 plus a hook, but you know what? I'm not going to. Ohio State, smallest margin of victory this season was 24, and that was against Florida Atlantic week 1. Watch the game. It was really a blowout. It was probably, they should have won by more than that, but they didn't. They won by 24, and that was their lowest margin of victory on the season. Closest comparable competition, for Ohio State on the year would probably be Wisconsin. That's what I would say, Woj. Going through the schedule, would you agree?
I would agree. They kind of destroyed that game.
They did. They won by 31 in that game. I'm going to stay away from this one. I don't know what side to bet. Again, I don't see value, kind of like we talked about at the beginning. I'm going to grab my popcorn, eat it, and enjoy the game. I'll keep the money in my pocket.
Oklahoma State 7-3 heading to West Virginia. Mountaineers 4-6, 11 o'clock on ESPN2. So just a couple notes on DFS for this game. Tylan Wallace is out for the season. He suffered that, I think it was 2 weeks ago, and now we've kind of fell to see who's going to take his place as the top wide receiver for Oklahoma State, and it looks like Dylan Stoner. He's only 5,200 on DraftKings this week. He was targeted 47% of the time in the TCU game and 30% last week against Kansas. He's a cheap option, and he's getting a lot of targets, as you can see. So he'd be an awesome option in that game. And Oklahoma State, we know they love passing the ball to Tylan Wallace. So if Dylan Stoner is going to take the place, I'm all over it at 5,200. Option on West Virginia side of the ball would be George Campbell. He's a wide receiver. 5,000. He's pretty cheap. Now, here's the reason why he's cheap. With TJ Simmons, their top wide receiver, on the IR, they've spread the ball out a little bit in the last 2 weeks. So last week, 4 receivers had over 17% of the targets. So that's not good for DFS. And Campbell did have most of the workload as far as DFS last week. He did get 2 touchdowns on his 5 grabs. So he made use of his 17% of the targets. The week before, Sam Jones, who's 5,300 on DraftKings, was 35% of the targets. So it's kind of a crapshoot. It looks like last week they went to more of a wide receiver by committee, kind of spread the ball around a little bit more. The week before, it looked like Sam Jones got most of it. So listen, if Campbell can do what he did with the 5 touches he did last week and got the 2 TDs, I think he's a solid option at 5,000.
Makes sense. You got a spread here on the game. Oklahoma State giving 7. Again, I don't see much there, Woj. It seems like you got some, fantasy football players for it. So maybe that's what we get out of this game as far as putting a wager down. I don't know. I'll leave that to you guys. Maybe the roundtable will have something to say about it this week. But something I am looking at, and I think you and I might disagree on this, Woj, but I'm looking at the UCF at Tulane game, 11 a.m., about the same time as the West Virginia game. Tulane +6, over under a 69.5. I like this Tulane football team, Woj. On that L side, those red L's, they got some quality teams. Auburn, Memphis, Navy. Those are 3 of Tulane's losses. All good teams they lost to. Lost to Temple last week, a little concerning. Likely why the spread is here rather than at a field goal. As it sits now, it's +6, I mentioned. UCF, not as strong of a team as the past few years. Could be due to them playing better competition this year. I don't know. Maybe their team's not as good, which I think Woj might disagree with me on the flip side of this. But I've been waiting for an opportunity to get good value on Tulane. This is the first time I've really seen it. I'll likely be jumping on this.
It's not that I don't like Tulane, Wall, but, as far as this game goes, it's 69.5. The Tulane Green Wave and Coach Willie Fritz like to run the ball a lot. And I just feel like if they do that, it's going to run a lot of the clock down. And I mean, UCF's going to get their chances. So as far as DFS, I like Dylan Gabriel, the quarterback, at 7,100. Seems like a pretty good price. I see him getting value, see him getting 3 TDs and around 290 yards passing, which can get him right around that value mark. I just don't know if Fritz is going to game plan to try to drain that clock and slow it down. And we've seen Tulane struggle versus some of the better teams. And UCF is no crazy awesome team this year, but they're pretty good. If you were going to take someone on Tulane, though, their quarterback, Justin McMillan, who's 6,300, he is their top rusher. He's got 12 rushing TDs in the season, and that's not including his 13 passing TDs. So he'd be an option, a cheaper option at 6,300 if you're looking for a cheap quarterback. But like I said, I don't know if I like Tulane in this one just because I don't think they're going to score that many points. I don't think that over-under's all that accurate, but I could be wrong there. It all kind of comes down to the game plan and how they play it.
It is pretty crazy to not see a lot of value in that over-under of 69.5. I've been following along with you all season, Woj, and I noticed once it gets up to that number, there's usually a few players you're going to talk about. Kind of makes me wonder about that Pac-12 game, UCLA at USC. We got an over-under in that game of 64.5. USC's -14. I'm guessing with the 64.5, you see some value there, no?
Oh, every time I see UCLA and USC, I would just lick my chops because this is juicy because UCLA loves to give up a lot of points and try to score a lot of points, and USC just likes to throw the ball a ton, no matter if it works or doesn't work. I'm loving Keaton Solvis this week, the quarterback from USC at 7,000. I think he is a bargain going into this game at 7,000. UCLA gives up chunks of yards and has been torched by other teams. I just have visions of that Washington State game where it was like 60 something to 60 something. Solvis has thrown for over 400 yards and 4 TDs in each of the last 2 games against Cal and ASU. So maybe they finally figured it out in the passing game, or maybe they're just dumb luck because they just continue to pass the ball as much as they humanly possibly can. So I'm going to pair him with a wide receiver. I'm going to take Michael Pittman Jr., their number 1 wide receiver, at 7,600. He's expensive, but he's had back-to-back huge weeks. He's at 82 receptions on the year, and with Tyler Vaughn, one of their other wide receivers, hurt and injured, I mean, this is a huge opportunity for Pittman. And like I said, Solvis, Pittman had back-to-back huge weeks. I like them, especially going into UCLA, who loves to give up a lot of yards at home. This is a juicy one for DFS.
Something again, I really don't know as far as those two teams go. Line makes sense to me, I guess. UCLA, though, they can come out and surprise. You never really know with that team.
I'm with you. You never really know. So that's why I like the USC players, and Keaton Solvis and Pittman they should have a really good game no matter what. Moving on, we got SMU 9-1 at Navy 7-2. Midshipmen lost one last week to the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. This game will be on at 2:30 on CBS Sports Network.
We did. Well, I should say we let the fans know last week. We thought that spread was a little off, Woj, and it sure was. Notre Dame came out and they handled Navy. But as we spoke last week, Navy is a good football team. They're given 3.5 in this game, over under a 66. Really interesting game. 3.5 is the full game line. First quarter -3. First half -3. You really don't see that very often. Something to look at if you're going to take one side or other, depending what side you're going to take. Maybe look to take the first quarter or first half lines as they're so close to the full game line. It's going to be a good game as far as college football goes. We're watching two teams that could easily be Power 5 teams, in my opinion. Navy has been dominating the series from a sports wagering standpoint, covered 5 of the last 6 series games back to 2010. Under field goal spread, only 2 games back to 2008, Woj. 2-point spread in 2010, 1-point spread in 2017. Navy covered both of these games, something to keep in the back of your mind. Shows a little favoritism, from the books towards SMU. They haven't been getting it exactly right. Two teams, as far as the game goes, not really known for their defense this year. Mustangs of SMU giving up 32.7 points per game. Navy giving up 21.9 points per game. Standout offenses, though, with SMU at 522 yards a game and Navy at 446 yards a game. I really like Shane Buechele. Little biased, transfer from Texas. Everyone knows I like Texas, but he's really cutting up some defenses with his ability to spot receivers. Man, cover 2, cover 3, even a cover 4 or dime. He's still finding holes in the secondary. 3,195 passing yards on the season, 8 interceptions. Interceptions can be an issue for him. Not a ton of them, but they generally come at bad times, which is never good for a quarterback to do. Is he a potential daily fantasy player, Woj?
He is, but I'm going to go with James Prochet because he's probably the best wide receiver in college football right now. He's 7,700 on DraftKings. He's expensive, like I said, but he's awesome. Averages 10 grabs a game, maybe a little bit over that. Coming off a 13 and a 14 reception game. Also has had a TD in every single game Wahl but the first. And he's averaging over a TD in per game this year, which is insane. I just like Brochet. 7,700. Navy spreads the ball out too much. Shane Buechele is a possibility as well, but he's pretty expensive. I think there's better options out there, especially like Keaton's Solvis, like I talked about, is pretty much a shoe-in to get value at 7,000. But Prochet is definitely a wide receiver to look at 7,700. I know he's expensive, but he's well worth the money with the amount of grabs he gets.
That makes sense to me, Woj. A little note I wanted to give everyone out there too that you should probably be looking for good things to come from Navy and other academies in the future. A new military rule that actually just went into effect this week, it allows service academy athletes to get a waiver and actually go pro. So for football, it allows the athletes to go to the NFL. They can defer their military service requirements or essentially pay back their tuition if they do choose to go pro and are able to. Keenan Reynolds might jog people's memories. You know, he drafted in 2016 NFL draft. Because of a policy similar to this at the time, it allowed him to go there, but it was eventually rescinded by the military a year later. But really what this does when people can't go to the NFL, it limits recruiting options of the top players. You know, a top player, little to no chance they're going to go to a service academy if they know they can't go to the NFL. You know, that's a lot of good players' goals. Definitely not a sales pitch when they're visiting these top-notch athletes trying to recruit them. I also think it's going to be better for football teams. Usually means like better recruiting of students overall, not just athletes. It's good for the schools. So great for the players, great for the schools, great for the respective football teams. You know, it's got my stamp of approval. I wanted to make sure everybody was aware of it.
That's my stamp of approval too. That'll definitely help the military academies out a ton trying to get some football players. Quick note on the Texas Baylor game. Texas traveling to Baylor, who's 9-1, lost that heartbreaker against Oklahoma last week, 2:30 p.m. on Fox Sports 1. Texas is a 6-point favorite, and the over/under is 59.5. A couple guys I just want to talk about with DFS in this one really quick. Devin Duvernay, wide receiver from Texas. We talked about him many times in this podcast before. He's 7,300. Pulled off $300 per point, which is overvalue. Against ISU last week. Still pulled in 9 touches, just didn't find the end zone. So still got his consistent touches, just didn't get to the end zone. Could easily get to the end zone in this game against the Baylor team. If he keeps consistently getting those touches, I don't see why he's not a good pick as far as value goes, especially in a cash game. Guy I'm really pumped about in this matchup is Denzel Mims, the wide receiver from Baylor, 6,600. Did good for us last week, got us undervalue at 243 per point against Oklahoma. He did get banged up a little bit, but he's expected to play against Texas, so just keep that in mind. He's been a big part of the Baylor offense of late, 17 receptions, getting 26% of the targets in the last 3 games. So 26% is a lot on a team, especially going in multiple games in a row. So look for him to get a bunch of touches. Wahl, we got Arkansas 2-8 going to LSU 10-0, 6 o'clock in ESPN. This could be a barn burner, right? No.
It could be somebody's barn getting burned. I'm guessing Arkansas's, but we got LSU sitting as a 44-point favorite, over under of 69.5. Since 2008, Arkansas has covered 8 of 11, Woj. They're surprising me with these things all week. 8 of 11 Arkansas has covered since 2008, but in this game, LSU's at home, best team in the nation. Last game before A&M. You know, this A&M will be their biggest roadblock to the SEC championship. I kind of think I know how this game's going to go.
I mean, you're covering, covered 8 of the last 11. It's pretty hard not to cover a 44-point spread, Wahl. Holy moly. I mean, that's a big number. But LSU is the number 1 team in the nation. We've seen them play pretty well. I'm going to steer clear of Arkansas. 7 losses in a row, only scoring 19 points versus Western Kentucky last week. I don't see them scoring very many points against LSU. Definitely not more than 19. Justin Jefferson, as far as LSU goes, is a good pick. Wide receiver LSU, 7,100. I'm taking him over Jamar Chase, Chase has been a really good receiver as of late. Problem is Chase is $1,000 more, and they've been basically pulling in the same amount of target percentage and getting the same workload. So I'm just going to take the cheaper option, which is $1,000 less dollars. I can keep in my pocket to put somewhere else for about the same workload. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who has just been destroying as of late, is questionable. And considering how this game might go, I don't even know if they'll play him because it'd be so lopsided. Again, the same goes for Joe Burrow, the quarterback for LSU. He's 8,200. I just don't know how much playing time they'll get, and if he will. I don't know what the game plan is here. I mean, this is so lopsided. I want to kind of steer clear with DFS as much as I possibly can because I don't know who will play and who won't. And if you're going to spend that kind of money, you want to make sure they're going to be pulling in at least value.
Makes sense. It really makes sense. You know he's playing that whole game, Woj. Joe Burrow is a lock. But like you said, he might not be playing the whole game. If he was, LSU's averaging 400 yards a game in the air. Heisman front runner sitting in that pocket. Mr. Joe Burrow, we're just talking about 38 touchdowns, 6 interceptions only to go with those 38 touchdowns, 93.2 quarterback rating. Minus 5,000 to win the Heisman right now. That means you put 100 on the line. You're going to win 2 if you're right. Incredible. This guy's the man. Great LSU football team in general. Number 1 team in the nation against a paltry Razorback team on a 7-game losing streak. 44, not nearly enough. That's a question I'll pose to you. Week 1 to 5, I'd agree. I'm hammering LSU. Want to caution people, though, to think about this a little bit more before taking. The reason, it's easy. Like Woj said, they're going to be sitting some players. Why in the hell would LSU want to run up the score in this game? This game means nothing to them, assuming they win. They do what they need to lock in a win, and they sit some players. We saw what happened to Tua last week, right, Woj?
Yeah, I mean, it possibly could happen. It's like I talked about with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He's questionable. I don't even know if he plays at all.
No, you get the same thing as Tua last week. You got somebody sitting out in a game that you're going to win anyway. LSU's not going to risk that. Ed Orgeron's not going to risk that. This game's going to mean nothing to the playoff committee. LSU has already proven their worth. A&M and Georgia are really their only 2 obstacles, assuming, lightning doesn't strike here and somehow Arkansas pulls out a win. But what some of you might gather from this is take the Razorbacks plus 44. Hey, I never said that. You want to do that? Go ahead and do that. Personally, I don't bet on one of the worst Power 5 teams in the nation playing against the best team in the nation. It's a new rule of mine. I just created it today. But I'm just thinking, maybe put a pass on this one. Maybe it's not your best option. As you just mentioned, Woj, maybe keep the money in your pocket.
Yeah, this is just one of those games that everybody sees that 44 and they're just like, well, that's a huge number. They have to at least cover that, but it might not be possible. LSU is that good. How about Duke 4-6 at Wake Forest 7-3, 6:30 p.m. on the ACC network?
Duke plus 7 over under a 51. I mean, I'm guessing as far as fantasy football goes, a little too much spreading the ball around in this one.
You're hit the nail on the head there. Well, 2 teams that like to do that. They like to use a lot of different weapons to get the job done. Duke has had 5 receivers last week with over 11% of the targets, with the highest being 22, and there were 2 at 22. So that's not good when you're spreading the ball around that much to receivers as far as DFS goes, no matter how cheap they are, because you don't know who's going to get the ball. They also have 3 running backs if you include Harris, their quarterback, as a running back. They all get about equal amount of rushes per game, so that's a questionable there too. And Wake Forest has been a mess as of late with injuries to key receivers, and Jamie Newton, the quarterback for Wake Forest, 7,100 with implied points being at 22 for Wake Forest. I just don't see him reaching value with that low a number.
Hey, we got 2 teams that have really tough outings as of late. Both teams not playing so great. I'm not going to give my pick right away. If you stick around for the Woj and Wahl pick 'em, though, you'll know where I'm leaning.
Well, we'll have to see, Wahl. That could be a little sketchy there.
Woj, we got a tweet this week. Really good tweet, in my opinion, too. Good question to ask, but it came from Miss Lizzie. She asked, what do you guys think of the current rankings? What should we look for in upcoming games for odds in the playoffs? Your thoughts, Woj?
That's a great question. My thoughts are the top is pretty set in stone. You have LSU and Ohio State both look good. They've given the playoff committee nothing to think that they're top teams. We'll see this week with Ohio State going to Penn State. Penn State going to Ohio State. They're going to have a tough game there. We'll see if that sways the playoff committee at all, depending on how Ohio State comes out in that game. You have Clemson, who's 11-0. They haven't really played anybody, but you can't knock the champion last year off the platter, I guess, even though they say that has nothing to do with it, really. My couple of issues come in a little later. So we have Oregon, who I think has showed enough to be number 4 this year. Nothing to take away from Georgia and Alabama. Both are great teams, but I think Oregon has showed a lot. They lost that close game, their only loss against Auburn, the first game of the season. And it was a close game. It could have gone both ways. It was a great game. And they've rolled the table since with key wins at Stanford, at Washington, at USC, and then finally at home versus Arizona. And, people could say the same thing about Utah, who's ranked right behind them. Oregon right now is ranked 6, or Utah is 7. But I think Oregon just looked more impressive. They have a more impressive road wins. So I like Oregon. I think they deserve to be in the conversation for number 4 right now. And we'll go from there. We'll just see what happens in the Pac-12 championship. Their defense has shown up quite a bit lately, too, and their offense is finally on par. So they just look like a good all-around team at the moment. What I don't really understand is the Baylor-Oklahoma mess we have going on in here. So you have Oklahoma, who right now is ranked 9th at 9-1, and you have Baylor, who's 14th at 9-1, okay? Baylor was dominating last week in a game. Maybe dominating is a strong word, but winning the entire game up until the end against Oklahoma, right, Wahl?
They were dominating, Woj. I think you were right the first time.
If the playoff committee holds Oklahoma in such high regards, why hasn't Baylor moved up in the rankings after that? It's Baylor's only loss. They were winning that game for most of it. Yeah, they did lose. And Oklahoma has had back-to-back bad weeks now. Iowa State almost took them to overtime, and they tried to win the game with the 2-point conversion 2 weeks ago. So I don't know if I agree with the Oklahoma, and I certainly don't agree with Baylor not moving up in the standings if they like Oklahoma that much. It's fine if you want to keep Oklahoma there, but then why isn't Baylor number 10 or closer than 14? It just doesn't make any sense to me. That one's a scratch in my head. I don't get that one. How about you, Wahl?
Well, I like what you said, Woj. I'll go even further. You said Oklahoma hasn't played good the last 2 weeks. Hell, they haven't played good the last 3 weeks. You remember they lost to Kansas State 3 weeks ago. So, you know what? Every week these playoff
that's true. Yeah,
absolutely. That was their one loss in the season, and they looked awful in that game. But every week, these playoff rankings come out. There's something that angers me. I kind of agree with you this week, though, Woj. It's all opinionated at this point, especially since we still have games to play. But I kind of agree with them. LSU, Ohio State, no-brainers. Clemson, like you said, they're undefeated. They got to be up there. That's just the way it has to be. Georgia, Bama, doesn't matter. SEC championship's going to settle that out. Pac-12, Oregon, and Utah 6 and 7. I kind of like where they are, Woj. You know what? They have a chance to move themselves up, so I don't mind where they are. I don't disagree with you. Oregon maybe should be up there at 5 or 4, but these two teams, they play each other in a conference championship. Potentially, they have a chance to jump. So I'm okay with it. My real gripes, same as you, Woj. They come in with the Big 12. Oklahoma should not be in the top 10. Like we just went over, for the reasons we just went over, they have not looked good at all the past 3 weeks. They got smoked by that Kansas State game that we just kind of talked about. The score doesn't matter. They ended up coming back at the end and making it close, but watch the game. They got smoked. Kind of the same thing you were saying about Baylor last week. Same circumstance. Another one makes absolutely no sense to me. Oklahoma State, another Big 12 team, sitting at 21 with Texas not even in those rankings. Texas, 4-loss team. Oklahoma State, 3-loss team. On paper, I guess it makes sense, but heads up, Texas won this game. One of Texas's losses was to the best team in the nation, LSU. They've been playing people. You want to keep both teams out? That's fine with me. But to put Oklahoma State above Texas makes no sense. So Big 12, we're in agreement, Woj. There's a lots of questions to ask about that. Back to the tweet, Woj. As far as the tweet goes, this is why I really like it. The second part of the question was, what should we look for in upcoming games for odds in the playoffs? This is why I like the question. Smart money, sharps, people that actually profit from sports gambling, this is what they're asking themselves. They're not just focused on this week's slate. They're looking ahead. Well, in answer to the question, odds in the playoffs, I think for the most part, these odds are already set, depending which teams play which teams. I'm pretty sure odds are set. Only 2 games left in the season. We know what teams we're dealing with. Only caveat might be if a shakeup occurs. Let's say a big upset against one of the top 3 teams. we could be watching to see the Pac-12 performance in their games. These odds might not be as concrete because Oregon, Auburn, that's the only comparison really for the Pac-12 against the rest of the nation. As I see it, the way it stands right now, I think Ohio State, obviously the most likely team to win the national championship, probably -2.5 against LSU, -3 against Clemson. Bama, they'd probably be -5.5. Georgia, maybe a full touchdown against one of the Pac-12 teams, 10.5. I think those are kind of set unless we see something crazy, the lightning striking, as I like to say. LSU plays someone, they're probably -1 or 1.5 against Clemson, probably -5.5 against Georgia, maybe 6. We'll see this in the SEC championship, though, likely, so that'll answer itself. Ohio State, back to the question, in answer to what games we should be looking at, Ohio State, Michigan next week could tweak the line for anyone in the playoffs against Ohio State. Ohio State squeaks by, it would drop the points they're given to LSU or Clemson. They play well against, or crush Michigan for that matter, likely no change at all, and I think we go back to those odds I kind of just mentioned.
Well, a couple of games to also look at are what Minnesota and Wisconsin are going to be doing here in these next couple of games, because one of them is going to go from the Big Ten West to the Big Ten Championship to likely play Ohio. Well, what I'm guessing right now is going to be Ohio State, and what they do in the next couple of games could influence those lines greatly. Because right now you got Minnesota at +650 to make it, and Wisconsin at +1 or 1,200. So bets on either of those right now could make you pretty big money, even if it's a small bet. I like looking at those two. I like what you talked about with a shakeup in the top 3 and the Pac-12 kind of moving up, and that's something to look at as well. But I really like looking at those Minnesota, Wisconsin area just to see who's going to go to that Big Ten championship game to likely possibly even win that and then go to the playoffs.
I like the fact you brought up odds to make the playoffs because it kind of goes along with this question, though not asked exactly. If you have a dog in the fight, most games you'll be concentrating on this week and next week for that matter are actually the other team in the conference from whoever you had bet on maybe for a futures bet to make the playoffs, maybe to make the national championship. This week there's not a lot to look at. If you're looking at a plus money team, you want to get your bet in now. Clemson, LSU, Ohio State, those are minus money teams. Everybody else is a plus money team. Georgia, basically betting on them to win the SEC championship. Not going to get better odds than now. Oregon, Utah, you're watching the other team, like I just mentioned from the combo, really. That's what's going to decide whether your team makes it. Both teams this week against Arizona's, Oregon playing Arizona State, Utah playing Arizona. Odds will move against you if the other team loses. I think this is contrary to popular belief. A lot of people disagree, but I really think this is the reason you should get your bet in now if you're going to bet on one of those teams. Because if the other team in those combo loses, it's going to hurt your odds. Alabama, that's a team that just needs help. If they get that help, their odds will drop. So you're going to put them in one of the futures bets, take it now. The minus money teams, you can wait on your bet. Arguably, Ohio State or LSU loses, they still have a shot. If they lose, you're going to get much better odds in that situation with them still having a chance to make the playoffs. Clemson, really a non-issue. Don't bet it. Who cares what happens unless they lose, obviously.
Well, this is kind of hedging season too in terms of, the odds to make the playoffs. Say you have a bet on Ohio State not to make it. Then you have a bet, on Wisconsin or Minnesota to make it at a much greater return on investment. Just options there to keep open when you're looking down the line at these Big Ten or all the championship games around the league, right?
I agree. Woj, I'll agree with you. I think we're going to get a lot better opportunity, though, when conference championships come around, because that's where you can maybe get a chance at a dog if you had somebody in a futures bet to make the playoffs or not make the playoffs. I think this week, next week, you'll have a little opportunity, like you mentioned, Woj, but come conference championship time, that's where you're really going to have your hedging opportunities.
All right, well, it's that time of the podcast, the Woj and Wahl Pick'em. Who are you taking this week? You had, first let's go over last week. We all had wins. You had Notre Dame giving 7. I had Florida giving 7. And Story, who was the guest last week, had Fresno State, the San Diego State under at 43. I think they went pretty well under that as well. Who are you taking this week, Wahl, with your 8-4 record?
I don't get to take a pass, Woj. I don't get to push it forward.
Nope. You got to have somebody, Wall.
All right. Well, like I said, I don't see much value. I got to put somebody like Woj says. He's putting the nail to the coffin on me. I'm going to take Wake Forest -7. That's really the best option I see.
Well, I'm 5-6-1. I'm struggling here. I'm looking for a win this week, and I like UCF -6, and maybe even parlay it with the under at 59.5. I talked about that game and how Tulane likes to run the ball. The clock might get run down a little bit. I don't know if I see it going to 69.5, but I could be wrong. But I do like UCF by more than what they're expecting that spread. I just see them coming out and just going wild on a Tulane Green Wave team.
I knew we were going to disagree on this, Woj. I should have taken Tulane so we could have had a pick 'em, head-to-head pick 'em, but I'm not that strong on Tulane, so hey, I hope you win. I put you at that 6-6 record with your one tie. But this week I'm going to be more concentrated on our DraftKings league. Set up, ready to go, right, Woj?
It's set up, ready to go. I talked about it in the mini episode this week, mini episode 9. We have a DraftKings league for college football rundown. You can get the link to the league on our website or in the description of the mini episode, which you should listen to. It'll kind of go through everything on how to get logged in or how to sign up for DraftKings and all that. Again, it is completely free league just to kind of have fun and go at it.
I can't wait to beat you, Woj. It's not for money, though, right? It's free?
It is free. We're going to do the 11 this week. We're going to do the 11-game afternoon slate.
Well, maybe you and I will put a little side hustle on it between ourselves. What do you think?
Now we'll have to see. Yeah.
Well, for those of you that want to get a little more about gambling, we're actually going to do a special episode this week too. It's going to drop Friday morning. We're going to do a little roundtable discussion. I know I didn't see much value this week, but maybe one of the other people in our roundtable will see value as far as the sports gambling lines go. If you guys want us to go over any specific games, you can tweet at us or tweet us with any questions if we didn't cover today, especially, right, Woj? What's our Twitter handle?
Our Twitter handle is at WWCFB.
Hey, it's going to be a good time. Hopefully people enjoy it. Hopefully people enjoy the DraftKings League this week, and I can't wait to crown myself champion week 1.
Don't get ahead of yourself there, Wall. There's still a lot of DraftKings knowledge you need.
We'll see, Woj. We'll see.
Thanks for listening, everyone. You can catch us on Twitter at WWCFB. Our Instagram's college_football_rundown. Our website, which you can get all our podcasts and information and contact me and Kyle on, is collegefootballrundown.com. Thanks again for listening, everybody. I'm Woj.
I'm Walt.
And this was the College Football Rundown. We're out.